2023, I feel, depending on who you asked, was either one of the best years for games or the absolute worst. And the people who say it was the absolute worst point to one of 3 games that had zero build-up or hype behind it, and surprise, they weren't good. I feel like everyone got what they wanted this year. JRPG fans got Final Fantasy XVI, fighting game fans got mostly great returns to form with Mortal Kombat 1 and Street Fighter 6, Soulsborne fans got that Liza P game, which I've heard is pretty good, but I am a more refined, acquainted human being. I am the one who plays. And let me tell you something. For me, this year has to be one of the absolute best in terms of not only all the new stuff that came out, but all the old stuff I played. This year was an absolute slam dunk in terms of basically everything I played. So many games I played this year are now personal classics for me. Legitimately, I haven't had this consistent amount of enjoyment since 2017 or so. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get going. But before we begin, like last year, I want to take a moment to talk about a few games that either aren't finished yet or just barely made the cut for one reason or another.
Welcome to Paris 47. The show is just about to start. This is the red carpet event of the season, and the guest list is a veritable who's who of the global fashion elite.
As you'll probably see as this list progresses, I got really big into stealth games and imsims this year, and after I got through the big ones, the modern Hitman trilogy was on my list. Hell, even before this year it was on my list for a while. I bought Hitman 1 and 2 a few years or so ago, but never got to it till now. Of course, this means I had to buy everything again just so I had access to everything, and even the entire World of Assassination bundle doesn't contain everything but one at a time here. Point is, I was already interested. That old Donkey video back when it was just one's prologue was really all I needed to convince me back then.
Yeah, I snuck a peek, so shoot me.
Alright.
I'm only about halfway through the first game's missions as of now, hence to why it's just on this honorable mention section, but I'm really enjoying my time so far. Great mission design combined with that sandbox factor I love from other games. It's a hard game to really analyze in full though, because it really emphasizes replayability, more so than other games I'd say. There's just so many ways to complete missions that I really feel that just beating it once and moving on to the next is gonna feel really unfulfilling for most. For me, I always do enough to get the max mastery level for certain missions before moving on to the next one. That way I can take in as much as possible and really get familiar with a map. It's pretty good, although I do need to bitch about the obvious. Alongside having to pay for content I already owned again, this game is always online when it has no reason to.
Connecting! Yeah, look at that! It's awards time already! Requires a central server!
All it's for is for leaderboards and, I guess, the progression system, but what reason is there for it to not function offline? It's really dumb. Other than that, definitely give it a shot if you're interested in stealth games. Just don't expect a game to binge in a weekend.
I only had one thing to give up for this job. My humanity. Some would say. I never had it anyway.
I played this before Pyro made it cool. It's funny to think about how I basically didn't touch any Half-Life mods for a while, despite the series being my personal all-time favorite. Hunt Down the Freeman kinda convinced me that the talent in that scene was just gone and all there was glorified fanfiction. It's dumb on my part looking back, but also keep in mind I was in high school and was emotional about dumb things. But if there was any mod to get me interested in the scene again, it's Entropy Zero 2. A near 8-hour campaign that effortlessly combines so many concepts and things across the Half-Life universe that any other developer could have easily screwed up, on top of bringing new gameplay elements to the table that don't feel out of place in a Half-Life game at all. No spoilers, but there's a section that, despite it being almost entirely puzzle-based, doesn't feel like a pace breaker at all. The way this mod handles its combat and narrative beats is genuinely great, and is on par with Episode 2 in terms of being my favorite HL2 experience. If you haven't tried it yet, absolutely do. It's free on Steam and even has workshop support for people to make their own custom maps and campaigns, with bigger projects in development as I speak. If you love Half-Life, this and Black Mesa are absolute must-play fan projects.
I'm just getting started.
Well, this has been a long time coming. I couldn't even begin to tell you the amount of comments I've gotten asking if I was aware of the Duke Nukem Forever 2001 restoration project, which I'm like, of course. Ignoring the fact that I already showed it off back in that first video, I've been watching from afar since day one, watching this team grow and evolve over time, gradually fixing the leaked build to make it more stable for modern rigs. And back in January of last year, Mighty Foot Productions finally decided to show off what they've been working on for the last 6 months, the First Slice demo, containing a number of fixes from the initial build alongside the first few chapters of their restored campaign. Restoring a game like DNF is definitely a challenge, debatably even more so than other games. You're trying to decide not only what will actually work in terms of being faithful to the original game's vision, which was already notorious for the amount of feature creep it had, but also what will work in terms of making a competent game that anyone can enjoy. Even with the minor issues, I feel the Mighty Foot team knows what they're doing and has done a great job so far, both in terms of making a fun game, but also in terms of making a good Duke Nukem game, faithful to the characterization we saw from those original games. Having a game that goes straight into the action and having words backed up by actions. And this is what I was talking about in my original video. Duke actually giving a shit about the world around him and trying to fucking help people. None of this, oh, he has to be super edgy and offend everyone shit that so many Commodores seem to believe was true. There's so many of these moments spread throughout these first few chapters, and it's basically everything I asked for and more. This is Duke Nukem to me. A buff faction here that, while a little seedy and lives in a somewhat exaggerated world, ultimately cares for humanity and will fight tooth and nail to save it. Even having a different voice doesn't detract from it as much as I thought it would. Obviously they couldn't get John St. John, as not only it probably would have grabbed Gearbox's attention negatively, but also just wouldn't sound as much in line as it did back in 1996. But Gianni Montalbano does surprisingly good as Duke here. I mean, he already does a good enough impression to the point where I wouldn't complain in the first place if he was cast, but he sounds as spot on as ever here. If I was a newcomer who didn't really pay attention to the voices, I probably would have thought it was still John in this mod. My only real place of criticism is that while most of the new lines recorded are great, the ones that are re-recorded versions of the ones from the leaked build lack that oomph to it.
What are you, a bleeder?
What are you, a bleeder?
Bullseye!
Bullseye.
I kick ass for the Lord.
I kick ass for the Lord.
But I can definitely see that changing for the better down the line. My only other real complaint is that combat, particularly in terms of enemy variety, feels lacking currently. Now, I can't entirely blame them for this, since the leak only had 3 real enemy types finished, being the infected humans, parasites, and EDF soldiers. The rest were either partially finished or only had models made with no code attached to them. So much so that you can clearly tell when they reuse certain enemy code with the skins of other models, like they do with the pig cops near the end of the demo. It'd require making new models, but I would love to see more of Duke 3D's bestiary come back, like Fat Commanders, tanks, recon patrol vehicles. Hell, why not even take a bit from Alien World Order and make mini versions of the main boss as part of the enemy roster? You've got a Cycloid Emperor model already, after all. But even with that, there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of figuring out the exact combat flow they want to go for and how to execute it right. The idea is clearly there, a merging of Duke 3D and Half-Life's combat, but there's just so many weapons and ammo types that, honestly, I wouldn't blame them for scrapping with just the sheer amount of things they need to balance. That being said, however, they've definitely made some strides as of late in terms of combat balance and challenge, if the recent patch is anything to go by. It's a lot better, and item placement for when you get certain weapons makes a lot more sense now. Oh, and I nearly forgot to mention as well, but the music is aces. Brandon Bloom's already responsible for what I believe is the best grab bag cover out there, so he was already a no-brainer pick for me already, but his compositions perfectly embodied that orchestral action vibe we got from the 2001 trailer perfectly. It's just excellent. Finally, this is more of a nitpick, but alt-tabbing in full screen crashes this game no matter what, and there's no way to borderless window, which really makes it a bid for streaming and recording, which wasn't entirely the case for the original leak. Back when the original leak came out, I used this program called Borderless Gaming on Steam that allows windowed games to be rendered without their borders, and that worked fine, yet it doesn't here for some reason, and I don't know why. It's not a big deal, but I really hope they do fix that, since I am someone who likes to pause here and there to check Discord messages, and I don't want to restart my whole game every single time I do. There's still certainly lots of work to be done still, but I'm excited to see what will come from this project as more and more time passes, and hey, maybe if we're lucky, it could be the start of more official attention towards Duke. Despite being on a console no one owns, I've heard great things about that Duke 1 and 2 Evercade remaster. No doubt due by the project being helmed by Nikolai Woot-Kohendorf, who did the amazing Rigel Engine port of Duke 2 you saw me play in that original Duke video. Here's hoping it gets on PC or other consoles at some point in the future. Oh! You're wondering what happened to the Doctor Who Cloned Me in Bulletstorm video. I don't care. Okay, well, that's not completely true. I did actually play through DNF's DLC during the production of that first Duke video with the full intent of bringing it up if needed. But I didn't. And that's because this DLC kinda fucking blows. I mean, it is better and Duke isn't as much of a tone-deaf ass this time around, but it still doesn't change how not only retail DNF's combat is boring as shit, but also how the humor isn't any better and is in fact worsened by having this jackass follow you around.
Freaking lasers! Lasers! You'll never get me! Can't hit me, cocksuckers! Ha-hoo! Look out! Duck and cover, motherfucker! Hey, careful! Yeah! Come on! Yeah! Attaboy, Duke! Weapons hot! We got movement!
And no, a second playthrough didn't help either. I did play it again seeing if maybe something would work for me this time around, but it just didn't. I can see the positives for the time it came out, but I'm sorry, I don't agree with anyone who says this expansion redeemed the game or was what it should have been. And as for Bulletstorm, it's fun. Not exactly what I would have in mind as a blueprint for a Duke game, and having him be playable feels more like a gimmick than anything else, but it's fine. I was writing a script for both of these for a video forever back, but really lost interest early on at the realization that I'd either feel nothing or negativity for most of it. And that's the last thing I want to feel when making a video like this, since it means in turn the video is going to be boring as shit, so I ditched it. But if you do want more in-depth details on what I think of these things, I have some reviews typed down my backlog. If you want to follow what I'm playing, you should definitely follow it. It's basically Letterboxd but for games, and I plan on updating it consistently throughout the year. I even have an extended list on there right now, ranking absolutely every game I played this year, including replays if you want to see some more stuff I didn't talk about. Links to all of that in the description. Oh, and one more small thing regarding that original Duke video I want to clear up. Some people misunderstood me and thought that when I mentioned anything relatively masculine being considered toxic, that I considered it that. That was my mistake. I totally could have phrased that better in retrospect. What I was getting at when bringing that up was how Duke as a character tends to get unfairly put in that category, and how I feel in a way that's almost a byproduct of anything masculine being labeled as toxic, when that obviously isn't the case at all. I know it's late, but that is especially something I see being brought up time and time again, and I just wanted to clarify that for people. But we aren't done with honorable mentions quite yet. I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting a whole lot from a Quake 2 remaster. Not that I thought it was going to be bad or anything, Night Dive has continued to knock it out of the park with all their projects this year. Hell, just having easy access to multiplayer with a server browser and the room code system from the Q1 remaster would have been enough for me. But Quake 2 was always a game that I just didn't feel much for, you know? I never felt it was a bad game, just kinda average, I guess. A confident shooter that, while having some cool ideas, couldn't really be saved by a remaster. How much could they really add to make this worth it? More than I thought. Quake 2 Remastered is genuinely incredible. No joke, if it wasn't a remaster, an entirely new game, it would have absolutely gone on my main list. It's both made me a fan and is one of the best things I've played this year. It not only raises the standards of what remasters should do for their games, but raises the standards for even what Night Dive is capable of, something that they have even remarked upon for their future projects. But how do you do that? It's Quake 2, a game that, while not bad, was just kinda bland and marked the start of the post-Romero age of id that focused more on the tech rather than the gameplay. Well, not only through some genuinely great bonus additions that they didn't need to do, but small, meaningful changes to the core gameplay to make it just more challenging and by extension, more engaging. Right off the bat, let's start with the visuals. Already, they keep in line with previous Night Dive remasters of not only keeping the original art direction intact, but adding just enough to make everything feel new and even fix a few minor things too. For instance, texture filtering. Quake 2 was kind of the start of games forcing texture filtering on everything, and while not bad, really only works for some games, and even in general, some may have preferred that more crisp look of having it off. You could always turn it off in Quake 2 via console commands, and while it looked fine on the world view and textures, oh my god, why are the pixels aligned diagonally on the blaster? That is not right. Well, with the new enhanced visuals, not only are they made by default to be evenly spread with the pixels, but they even removed the wobble effect models had. A quirk of the engine that, while invisible back in the day due to the low resolution of common computer monitors, became more of a visible issue when playing the game on modern setups. And everything is touched up here too, every asset from the base game to even the expansions. Whereas the Quake 1 remaster at launch just had its base game assets touched up and nothing else, creating this jarring feeling when playing the mission packs. But how about the weapon feel as well? The weapons weren't bad per se, but they lacked a bit of punch to it. Muzzle flashes, baby. This is so minor, but goes a long way into making Quake 2's arsenal just feel impactful. These are things they absolutely didn't have to do, but it's just appreciated. But let's get into the gameplay. How do we make Quake 2 more challenging and engaging? First off, the restored cut enemy behaviors and damage tweaking. Enemies like the Berserkers, Gunners, Chain Gun Enforcers, Tanks, Iron Maidens, no relation, and more are all now much more challenges to be reckoned with by either restoring attack types that were cut from the final game, or subtly changing how their attacks work to be more accurate to the player or do a bit more damage. It's just enough that it feels like a genuine challenge and not unfair. And on top of that, an increased weapon slop speed. Not enough that you'll be able to pull off Doom Eternal quickscop combos, but just enough that you don't feel like switching weapons is akin to pulling your pants down in combat. I'd put it on par with the switch speed in the classic Doom games, if anything. All of this makes combat feel like a genuine challenge now, and just makes the game feel more fun. Play this game on hard, and you'll be in for a good challenge. I died a handful. I felt actually inclined to make a choice about when to use my stored power-ups instead of saving it all for the end. And on that note as well, 2 weapon wheels. One for your weapons, and one for your inventory items, both assigned to separate keys. This is so genius that I am genuinely shocked that no one else has thought of this before. Any old shooter with an inventory system like this needs this feature. It's unlikely considering it's on an older version of Kex, but I would love to see Bloodfresh Supply get this feature in a future update now that Atari and Night Dive are under the same umbrella. Now, all of this is great, but what about the levels? Quake 2 levels were mostly straightforward, sure, but they were still pretty big enough that you could get lost bad, especially for those bits where you needed to backtrack. No more with the compass. In your inventory, you have a new item that shows a line on the floor, akin to Dead Space or BioShock Infinite, that just tells you where to go. And this is a lifesaver, especially when going through the expansions, which require even more backtracking than the base game. Best part is you aren't forced to use this either. You can totally play the game without it, as it only appears whenever you select it in the inventory, as it fades away after a few seconds. It's just another way to guide you in the right direction if you feel you've been in an area for long enough and just want to move on. All of these changes make Quake 2 not only a super fun shooter, but no joke, one of my favorite id games, and even outclasses the first game in a lot of ways for me.
Did he just say
He did.
And it isn't just the base game and expansions too. Not only do we have Call of the Machine, a beautifully mapped new expansion done by Machine Games, but Quake 2 64's exclusive campaign. And it comes with the game already as well, no need to download it through the add-on menu like with the Quake 1 remaster. Again, they didn't need to do any of this, but damn it they did anyways, and I am so happy for that. And how about multiplayer? Of course you got co-op, crossplay, the room code system, and a server browser, but just look at these options here. All you could do back in the Quake 1 remaster was set a frag and time limit alongside bots, but in Quake 2, you could basically set up any game mode or specific game setting you want. Don't want to die from fall damage in this movement-focused shooter? Just turn it off. Want to make the weapons respawn on a timer instead of staying infinitely? You can change that. Want instagib, random weapon spawns? You can do that. Want to use the CTF exclusive power-ups in Deathmatch? How about the grappling hook? The weapons introduced in the expansions? It's all here, alongside nearly 50 maps in total across all modes, including the base game maps, the ones that came with the expansions, and even the multiplayer maps that came with Quake 2 64's multiplayer mode. Now, we done yet? Nope. Not only is there LAN console crossplay, but 8-player split screen on PC and modern Xboxes, holy shit. And it works really well too. Even on a controller, this game controls nearly as well as it would on PC. It's not entirely close, but I was actually able to host a 5-player split-screen deathmatch game at my college's game club, and no joke, it was probably the most fun multiplayer experience I've had in a long time. We all had a blast.
But I'm not done yet!
Want to know even more about Quake 2 and its development? The id Vault, a feature that, no joke, needs to become a standard for future id Software re-releases. You've got never-before-seen concept art, design documents, a model viewer for unused assets, and even playable E3 and ECT show maps. Yes, really. Whew. We done now? I don't think anyone expected a Quake 2 remaster to be this good or this content-packed, but we got it anyways, and I couldn't be happier. On top of all that, like Quake 1, being a free patch for anyone who owned the Steam and GOG versions prior. Sure, they raised the price like they did with Quake 1 as well, but $10 is a steal for all of this. I would have paid $20 for this and still felt like my money was well spent. Night Dive's Quake 2 is so good that it made what was one of my least favorite id games into one of my personal favorites. If you haven't tried it yet or were still iffy after playing vanilla, I encourage you, please play this remaster. It's night and day compared to the original release. This is how you remaster a game. And if this is a sign of what's to come from the upcoming Dark Forces and System Shock 2 remasters, then my expectations are sky high. Should Quake 3 get the same treatment despite it being multiplayer only? Have you played Quake Live in current year, or tried playing servers via source ports? Yeah, it's accessible, but only to a small number of people that know what QL is and how IO Quake 3 works. And even then, you really gotta go through some hoops to get a proper experience. That is, even if you can find people playing. I don't even think most people on the surface would even know Quake Live is Quake 3. Like, you'd think it'd be just another random spin-off from the name alone unless you took a second look. If Machine Games and Night Dive could maybe make their own maps included with it, I could totally see them making a Q3A remaster with the same features for maybe around $6 or $7. Either way, Quake 2 Remastered is one of the best things I've played this year and would totally be on this list if it wasn't a remaster. It's that good. Alright, with all that out of the way, let's get into the main list. We've got 18 games, more than I've ever had before for a personal list like this. I ordered them as best as possible based on enjoyment, but please keep in mind it was really close for me this year. If you're upset a game got a higher ranking, keep in mind that I basically love all of these on the same level. Except for the first, I guess. I don't know. Pizza Tower is really good. That's all I really need to say because you know that already and you've probably seen this game enough online this year. Even though this game's probably been tainted a bit by people because of the fans, I still love this game alone for its art style and sense of humor. This has to be one of the funniest, most stylish platformers I've ever played. That Sega Genesis 90s Nickelodeon Earthworm Jim style is so unique and honestly unlike any other indie out there, and the music is top notch as well. Give it a listen if you somehow haven't managed to already. Even though I personally feel the P ranking requirements of combos are too strict to the point where I don't want to bother, Pizza Tower is still a great game, and one I feel is going to have a long life ahead of it. I could see this game benefiting greatly from an expansion or official level creator. Maybe next year if we're lucky. This game fucking rules and I will die on that hill. Yes, it's simple and relatively schlocky, but it executes itself really well, and I'm sorry you can't see that, America. I won't talk too much here since I already made a video a while back talking about why I love this game so much, but Evil West just deserves so much more respect than it got. I will say at the very least that I've heard co-op is pretty broken, which is where a good chunk of complaints come from, which is fair. But at the same time, I can't say I'm really bugged by that since I really feel this game is played best solo. That one-man army feel is what Evil West excels the best at, on top of giving you all these tools and figuring out how to use them all the best. I'd honestly call it a third-person Doom Eternal with just how much you're juggling, particularly on hard or evil difficulty. It's a shame that, from what I can tell, this game didn't do as well as Focus or Wild Hog Hope and has flown under most people's radars. I mean, Christ, there isn't even an official upload for the soundtrack. I'd use YouTube rips of the title theme just for my video. This game would do super well with a sequel or expansion that just refined everything more. I'd honestly rather have Wild Hog make more games like this than Shadow Warrior with just how bad 3's story was. If you haven't played Evil West yet, absolutely do. You could probably find it for incredibly cheap over a sale. It's super worth it. Let me tell you something, GoldenEye never really impressed me as a game. I always felt that, while important, it never aged all that well and was really overhyped by its fans. And after finally beating it this year, yeah, I still feel kind of the same even if I do like and appreciate it a bit more. But you know what compelled me to actually beat GoldenEye? The better game. Perfect Dark made me appreciate games like GoldenEye, and by extension, other shooters of its style like Time Splitters. And thanks to its recent DCOM PC port, I was able to play through Perfect Dark all the way through at 60 FPS with an unlocked FOV, and even despite the age, it holds up a lot better than I expected. My biggest issue with GoldenEye, even now, is with its level design. It's just so big and confusing, and it never feels like the objectives are properly conveyed to the player to just where they are and how to deal with them. Perfect Dark doesn't have that problem. From the very first level alone, everything is laid out in such a way that it's not hard to figure out where you need to go or what to do at all, and also paces itself in such a good way between those objectives and the combat, which is still really fun. I also really love this game's whole sci-fi spy movie vibe. The setting, the characters, all the gadgets. This game feels like a giant love letter to those types of films, and you could tell Rare just had a fun time making it. My only real issue was just with that final level. Seriously, that final boss takes forever. Just fucking die already. I had to look up the hidden alien blasters in order to actually beat it since I would just always run out of ammo and then die after a certain point in the fight. Other than that, Perfect Dark is definitely worth a play, doubly so with the DCOM port, which seems to have only gotten more and more better after I played as more updates have rolled in, with it recently getting online multiplayer support. That is awesome. Here's hoping more people experience it soon and Microsoft doesn't fuck up that reboot and make it ultra serious for no reason. They're probably gonna. Another game I've already talked about before, this time in last year's Best Of video back when it was still in early access, so I'll keep this brief. Turbo Overkill's full release is just more of what we saw in early access, but amplified even more. You want a game with the speed of modern Doom on crack that constantly one-ups itself on the type of crazy weapons you get? That's this game. The term overkill is appropriate, as I feel this game almost redefines it with just how knucking futz everything gets. Episode 3 continues just what the first two did, but amping it up even more with your arsenal and level settings, constantly demanding smart play from the player the entire way through. You like the game in early access? You'll like it here. It's gone down as one of my favorite boomer shooters, just below Dusk and Ion Fury. Although, one thing I will say is I don't entirely like the way it ends. Spoilers, skip to here if you don't want to hear about it.
It could have been so beautiful. A universe in perfect harmony. And now, nothing. I have come from nothing, and to nothing I return.
It's over, sir. It's finally over.
So the game ends with Johnny defeating Sin, having a celebratory smoke as you hear a news anchor talk about the end of the war. Now, you'd think you'd roll credits there, right? Johnny finally walking off in the sunset ready to return to his old life and to kick more ass? Well, suddenly, for no reason at all, Ripper, that street cleaner who you got revenge on for killing you earlier in the game, is just back? You didn't kill her, I guess? What?
Ooh, you're not as fast as you used to be, Turbo.
She captures you and throws you into this back room where you meet face to face with that executive character you only heard during the early chapters of the game and gives you some information. Now, it was established earlier in the game that Johnny was trying to get enough money via being a street cleaner so that he could get brain surgery, as his memories would be lost if not done within 6 months. That was until Ma decided to be a dick and destroy it at the end of episode 2. The exec tells you that the doc who gave Johnny his temporary body kept a backup of his brain and offers Johnny an ultimatum. Terratech can give him a fully restored human body again alongside his brain, but with the catch that he has to work with them as a street cleaner for the rest of his life. And I guess it slightly implies that he takes the deal?
All you need to do is decide. Work for us as our perfected mercenary. And once the job's complete, we give you exactly what it is you desire.
I get they want to have build up for a sequel, but am I the only one who feels this ending doesn't fit at all and is a little unnecessarily mean on Johnny's behalf for no reason? Taking away Johnny's, and by extension the player's accomplishment of killing Ripper and getting revenge is already one thing, but making it so that the only way he can regain his memories and become him again, you know, the one thing that's been ultimately guiding us this whole adventure, being locked behind more or less being Terratech's slave, just feels exceptionally cruel for no reason. I'd expect a game like this to have a more standard action movie ending, and I would have no issue with that, you know? But here, it just feels almost unsatisfying for the sake of having a sequel, and I'm honestly not the biggest fan of that. I don't know, am I the only one who feels this way? Again, it doesn't take away from the rest of the game majorly for me, but it left me kinda empty near the end. I don't know. Either way, Turbo Overkill is still great and worth playing if you somehow haven't already. Let me tell you, even though I don't have much experience with Jet Set Radio as a franchise, I was still excited for Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. The most experience I had, of all things, was the iOS port. Yes, really. And I don't remember much of it aside from me sucking at it and it absolutely feasting on my 3rd gen iPod Touch's battery, as did all high-end games at the time. But either way, why get hyped up over the spiritual successor to a series that I didn't know much about? Well, aside from the art style and general Y2K vibe that's already up my alley, it seemed to be taking elements of gameplay from the Tony Hawk series and mashing it together with Jet Sets. And considering how the Pro Skater series seems to be very much on the back burner right now, for fuck's sake Microsoft, get Activision to finish the 3 and 4 remasters already, put them at gunpoint if you have to. This seemed to be the next best thing. Does it succeed? For the most part, yeah, I'd say so. Not totally, but Bomb Rush offered just enough not only to keep me satisfied as a Tony Hawk fan, but just enough to make me interested in maybe looking at the other games that inspired it. Some people like to say, this feels like a PS2 game as some kind of backhanded insult, but this game really does feel like that in the absolute best ways. Not even just with the low poly visuals, but even with smaller things, like the UI, and weirdly enough, the lack of voice acting kinda helped drive that vibe home. Or to be more specific, the way they handled voice acting, where for the most part it's just sounds or one-word sentences, and they only speak full sentences when delivering a big line. Anyone else feel that? The music, I mean, my god. Pizza Tower's music is great, right? I don't blame anyone for making that their soundtrack of the year. But this is only a bit below Hi-Fi Rush in terms of being my favorite soundtrack of the year. Straight up, this is the best licensed indie soundtrack I've experienced since the Hotline Miami games. And like the Hotline Miami games, it won't surprise me one bit if this game ends up being the jump-off point for a load of new fans of Y2K culture, like how Hotline birthed a whole generation of synthwave and 80s culture fans. This game's music in general is so varied in such a great way. The obvious move was to just pick a bunch of artists mimicking Hideki Nakanuma's style, and you do see some of that there alongside his own contributions, but there's a bunch of other stuff here that really gives the game its own flavor. Rap, lo-fi, electronic, each bringing their own mood and tone to each section of the game. One moment can have this chill, upbeat vibe,
like this, like switch, life is priceless, like this, like switch, life is priceless,
to becoming hype as hell, coming around to somber yet calm and collected for those story sequences. And the story, man, I had a lot of fun with it as well. Despite me being confused a bit early on with how Red lost his head and what that means in terms of his memories and all that, which did make sense by the end, I really like the character writing here. They're all really likable and have some fun charm to their personalities. But alright, gameplay. BRC is interesting because while the fundamentals are almost one-to-one Tony Hawk, it has some differences that, while appearing minor at first, make a big impact on the game's overall skill curve. BRC has no bailing, of any kind. If you fail a trick, you just keep going and lose your combo. No balance meter either, you either grind automatically when you hop on a rail or manual with the simple press of a button. This makes the game sound a lot easier than THPS, and to an extent it is, but the way combos are handled does compensate for this change. Instead of raising your combo multiplier by doing tricks whilst comboing with manuals like in Tony Hawk, you raise your multiplier in this game by doing tricks over certain landmark areas and rounding the corner over certain rails, on top of gaining a speed boost. Basically, if you want to get a big combo, you can't just spam the same tricks over one area of the map. You really gotta go all over the place, emphasizing the element of exploration and memorization of a map, which I actually don't mind. I almost wouldn't mind a future Tony Hawk implementing a point system similar to this, emphasizing more fresh location-based tricks to negate spamming. Ultimately, you don't really feel the effect of this change unless you do all those combo challenge achievements, as most crew challenges have a pretty easy point requirement, and that's really my only issue with the gameplay. However, I say all of this as a THPS veteran who has spent a lot of time with the games. I've seen people who haven't picked up a Tony Hawk game and felt the challenge was fine, not being too easy or too hard. I just wish there was a difficulty mode with higher point or graffiti requirements, at least as an option for those veteran players. Tony Hawk games have similar settings with harder challenges and requirements to progress, so why not here, you know? But that's all minor in the long run. Bomb Rush is hands down one of my favorite new indies this year, and I really can't wait to see what Team Reptile is cooking next. Rayman Legends is a game I've heard throughout so many circles for years as being one of the best, and I really can't add much else in that department. This is hands down the most fun I've had with a platformer since Sonic Mania. The design, music, art, everything about this game is just top-notch in every respect. Like Pizza Tower, every world brings a new gimmick to the table, and not a single one feels out of place or like a slog. This game has water levels that are actually fun. I'm honestly just upset I didn't play this game sooner, because I know if I did earlier, back when it first came out, it'd be an all-time favorite for me. While it's unlikely we'll see anything actually new with Rayman anytime soon that isn't a spin-off, it doesn't change the fact that this game is a classic and deserves to be played by as many people as possible. For as much as I talk about indie retro shooters, I don't talk nearly enough about what I consider to be the best out of all of them. And that's Ion Fury. The level design, the fast-paced combat, the gorgeous sprite work, and the self-aware cyberpunk setting just do it all for me. And sure, that might be my build engine bias talking, plus it already sharing a ton of background DNA with the Duke 3D modding community, but I don't care. This game rules. And this year, after God knows how long, we finally got the long-awaited Aftershock expansion, which honestly is just everything the main game did, but just polished to a sheen. The combat is at its absolute best here, with some new enemies, weapons, on top of new power-ups, alongside an inventory system to store them for later if you want. And you can just tell Voidpoint had the most fun with these. Hell, the theming in general, they went ham with the references and satire, which I love. Five Finger Discount is more or less just Duke 3D's shopping bag on steroids, with a ton of fan service and dark jokes that wouldn't be too out of place in a Duke game. The power-ups have to be my favorite, from a slow-mo energy drink,
This can't be good for me. I feel great.
to one that straight up makes Shelly RoboCop, pistol and all.
Your move, creep.
This entire expansion just feels like a giant love letter to Duke 3D and its modding community, alongside stuff the devs love, and it's just so fun. I could go on and on about those small moments that just make this expansion great. Again, it's just everything the base game did, but better. My only real issue is that it feels like there's less replay value here than the base game, which makes sense, it is shorter overall, but there's no secret level here, and man, I love the base game secret level. I would have loved to see another one here, but it's whatever. The new arrange mode for the base game totally makes up for it. If you love games like Duke 3D and somehow still haven't played Ion Fury or Aftershock yet, please do yourself a favor and do. It's insanely cheap nowadays during sales. Hell, even at full price, I'd still say it's worth it. What was already one of my favorite retro shooters has only gotten better with this DLC. This year was a big one for me in terms of survival horror, namely Resident Evil, but we'll get more on that in just a second. SIGNALIS is a game I was already sold on for its anime sci-fi art style alone, but I really wasn't expecting just how tense and impactful this game ended up being. It's everything I loved about games like the RE2 remake in terms of its gameplay, but with an isometric twist. And the story, while definitely confusing, leaves just enough to the imagination where you can easily infer the big picture by the end, which leaves you feeling gutted in the heart hard. It's really hard to talk about this game without spoiling it heavily, but man, that ending, so good. My only real issues would be first the very strict inventory limit, namely your flashlight taking up a slot, and while I sort of didn't mind that personally, as it brought up some tension in terms of preparing for what was ahead, I do understand how it could have bothered others. From what I know, in a recent patch they've added an option to give you a few more inventory slots if you wanted though, so it's not a big deal. That, and some of the puzzles near the final third were really confusing to me, and I ended up looking up the solution sadly. But then again, maybe I'm just stupid. That's probably likely. I really can't go much further than that than just saying play it for yourself. It's just amazing. I've already made a video talking about why I love the RE4 remake so much, and you're probably aware of how good this game is already, so I'll keep this brief. The RE4 remake did a surprisingly good job of living up to its predecessor, and while I don't think it entirely outclasses the original in some aspects, it still manages to be another great addition to the RE series like the original remakes did. The one thing I want to focus on, especially here, that I didn't bring up in my original video, is the writing changes this remake does. While it doesn't completely stick the landing for some characters, namely Sadler in terms of his lack of overall presence and Ada for Ada, what they did with Ashley and Krauser was incredibly welcomed. Krauser's backstory, while admittedly not much, was cool to see and actually gave some more meat to his character. And Ashley's just great in this. She has a lot of moments where she actually gets to do shit, and not once does it feel forced at all. It all feels earned. No shit, they hit a bit her having a larger role in future games, maybe as an agent herself, and I'd honestly love to see more of this version of her. In general, I love the dynamic Leon and Ashley have in this game. Their banter between each other in Dire Straits feels so wholesome, and that scene where Leon's just comforting Ashley after her outlash due to the Plagas is just so heartwarming and perfectly summarizes why I love him so much as a character. Despite all he's been through, he's never strayed from what made him want to join the RPD in the first place, and that's to help people in need. Even though it seems that remakes for games that don't entirely need it won't be going away anytime soon for the RE franchise, I honestly won't have an issue if they're at least half as good as this game. While not my pure game of the year, I wouldn't blame anyone for making this theirs. It's a remake that, against all odds, manages to stand next to the original and doesn't feel out of place. If you haven't played already and already love the original, then I don't know what you're waiting for. But even with that, I can't deny the king of all the RE games I played this year. I'm so upset I didn't beat the RE1 remake sooner. This game is regarded by many as being the king of survival horror, and I can't blame them one bit for it. Yeah, the tank controls aren't for everyone, but I actually didn't mind them on PC with the modern setting, since you still have a run button and it isn't locked to how far you drag your analog stick like it is on controller, making areas like the lab's fuel supply capsule section harder and more stressful than it already is. What wows me the most about this game all these years later is just how well it's held up visually. For the longest time, I genuinely thought this game used 3D environments for its background still, but no. In the spirit of the original, they're all hand-painted backgrounds with some effects scattered to further the illusion of items and lighting in the area, and it looks genuinely beautiful. In general, this game's tone and mood is still unmatched all these years later. The RE2 remake still makes me tense up replaying it, by all means, but this game late at night gets me stressed bad on top of the unconventional control scheme. Despite my troubles with ammo near the end of the game, which to be fair was kinda my fault since I was playing dumb and didn't entirely know what I was doing, meaning I had to knife the Tyrant, which is not fun at all, the RE1 remake is still a game I believe you need to play at least once before you die. It's survival horror royalty as far as I'm concerned, and so much of what you see in modern horror games today wouldn't exist without it. Last year when I beat Power Slave, it really opened me up to try more Metroidvanias. And I think some higher power was listening, because in March, we got an incredible remaster of the first Metroid Prime for the Switch, and there was no better time for me to finally give it a shot. It's been said already by most, but this remaster is absolutely gorgeous. Fantastic visuals with a rock-solid frame rate the entire way through. Legit, Retro Studios is on par with other companies like Panic Button in terms of showing other devs how to do Switch ports right. And overall, Prime is still really good. Not my favorite, but still great. My biggest issue with Prime is how it was marketed by others to me being a first-person Metroid game when it really emphasizes the latter more than the former. Not that it's a bad thing, mind you, but a part of me was expecting something more akin to Power Slave, where combat was as emphasized as much as exploration, which isn't entirely the case. It is there by all means, but there's a large emphasis more on atmosphere and backtracking and puzzle solving. Again, not bad, but I felt it overstayed its welcome a bit, especially by the end with the hunt for all those Chozo artifacts. Still, this is a classic and a great remaster, and I can only hope that Retro and Nintendo decide to give 2 and 3 the same treatment. But after that, there was another game I wanted to try that I already had my eye on for a while. Metroid Dread fucking rules. Prime was good, right? But Dread just clicked with me in every way possible. Straight up, it's become one of my favorite games of the past decade. The combat, the exploration, the atmosphere, everything is just perfect here. Words cannot do justice as to how much fun I had with this game. The player movement alone has to be some of the best I've experienced in a 2D game, and that parry attack never gets old to do. And the boss fights, holy shit, some of the best I've ever experienced in any game. Every single one. Also, maybe it's just me, but I found this game's conveyance way better than Prime's. There were just so many moments in Prime that I had no clue where to go, so I just wander for 10 minutes until the game said, "Hey asshole, it's over here." Yeah, that's probably a me issue, but I don't know, man. I like Dread's map design, even if it is more simple compared to Prime's environments. I also really like this game's emphasis on story too. Not that it wasn't there in Prime, but it definitely took a backseat to everything else. Samus's entire characterization in this game is so awesome, and the backstory that's on offer here is so engaging. That moment where she just tells Quiet Rope that she'll deal with Ravenbeak in her native Chozo tongue is just so fucking cool. And Ravenbeak, holy shit, what a fucking awesome villain. Dude has to have some of the best presence I've seen in a long time. Anytime you see this guy on screen, you know shit's about to go down, and that fight at the end is just the cherry on top. Hard as balls, but so fucking satisfying to pull off. And that moment near the end of the fight where Samus just loses her shit and yells at the top of her lungs, punching him in the face when all seems lost, is just so raw. God, I could go on and on about how awesome this game was. Should I have started with Zero Mission like everyone says? Yeah, probably, but I don't care. It's still easy to pop in Dre as you're caught up quickly and naturally on what's going on that I don't think it's really that bad if you do end up starting here. It's just so good. I think my only issues, if anything, were the load times being pretty long when fast traveling between areas, but even then, that's not a big deal, and also for all I know, maybe this is only an issue with the Switch that I've had since 2018 or so. If you have any curiosity playing these games, or just Metroidvanias in general, I cannot recommend Dread enough. It's quickly become one of my old-time favorites. If Retro ends up taking any cues from Mercury's theme for Prime 4, then fuck am I excited. I just hope it comes out before I'm dead. Alright, here we go. IMSIN time, baby. I played Prey back when it first launched in 2017, and even tried it a few times after that, and honestly, I couldn't tell you why I never finished it until now. I always liked the story and combat, yet I never felt compelled to finish it. Even more annoying sections that stuck out to me, like the guts and spacewalking, weren't even that bad coming back to it. But I'm happy I finally did, because Christ, what an underrated classic. Prey is some of Arcane's best next to the original Dishonored, and deserves so much better than it got. The weapons are punchy and fun to use, the design of Talos 1 is smart and constantly engaging to navigate, the neuromod powers are fun to use and abuse to accomplish tasks, and the narrative is some of the best I've seen in a game. The alt history setting alongside the twists and turns this story takes is so cool and actually drives a lot of replay value. Honestly, the biggest issue this game has going for it is the name, and the ire of fans of the 2006 shooter of the same name that got shafted due to Bethesda's petty-ass behavior trying to force a buyout. Arcane got dragged into this unknowingly, and in turn a lot of people thought this to be a reboot when it really isn't. It just has the same name, and Bethesda mandated the game to use it for marketing purposes and nothing else. Stupid, I know. If you can get over that, this is another all-time classic for me, and the closest we'll ever get to a modern System Shock or BioShock successor that isn't a remake. And speaking of... yeah, I know, right? This game is actually good and people were talking out of their asses for years? It really baffles me how so many people for so long treated BioShock 2 as the black sheep of the series, and the one you should skip no matter what. Because no shit, while I still love the first game a ton, this game does some stuff that I'd honestly consider a bit better. Sure, the story doesn't reach the heights of the first game, I mean, nothing can top that twist, but damn it, it didn't need to. As its own separate narrative, it's really great, on top of acting as an excellent expansion of the first game in the world of Rapture. The entire arc and relationship Delta has with Eleanor is so good, and the gameplay is as refined as it can get, I feel. Sure, a part of me still prefers the more human survival approach of the first game compared to playing as a Big Daddy, but I mean, you're playing as a Big Daddy. These fucking things. You can't tell me that's not cool. And the weapons, especially their upgrades, just match that coolness perfectly. Having a drill already is sick, right? But then you get the drill dash, and you just fucking... It's hard to pick a favorite since they've all got such great utility, even until the final hours of the game, but my favorite weapon has to be the shotgun, because already, look at this design. It's just two tubes stuck together, what's not to love? But what's funnier is when I got this thing at first, I was like, I mean, this is okay, not as satisfying noise-wise as I'd want though. But then, you get the increased damage upgrade, and it honest to god then becomes a weapon of mass destruction on par with Doom 2's Super Shotgun. Oh, yes, so fucking good. Even the smaller changes to the formula are great too. My favorite had to be with the hack gun. Yes, the hacking minigame from 1 was and still is iconic, but let's be real, after a bit it became a bit of a pace breaker. 2's real-time hacking, while simpler, creates much more engaging, snappier gameplay, and even allows you to make some smart plays with how you don't need to be standing directly next to a machine anymore if you want to hack it. This game's just awesome, man. I was expecting it to be better than people let on, but I wasn't expecting it to be this good. It's on par with the first game in terms of overall quality, if you ask me. Legit, if you've avoided this game like I have, do yourself a favor and give this one a shot. It's so good, and it warms my heart to see so many other fans of the series feel the same way.
Right in the edge of the sun in the smoky haze and dimming lights. Flying away, I want to stay with you. We sail in the city and drown under the neon lights. Running away, I want to stay in your smile because if I can tell the world, it's my desire things. Is that the price that we had to pay?
Am I cheating with this? Yeah, but I don't give a shit. Cyberpunk is such a vastly different game now compared to how it was when I first talked about it in 1.6 that I think it deserves a spot on this list. I was originally going to make a big ass video talking about Phantom Liberty and the 2.0 update, but I ended up losing interest with that over time. Not because I didn't want to do it, but it was just one of those things where I didn't have the energy in me and want to continue it, alongside some other life stuff I'll talk about at the end. Although I do want to talk at the very least a bit on some of the takes I had in that original video, because while not awful enough where I had a legion of people get angry at me in the comments, there's a few things I do want to correct myself on. First thing being, holy shit, I would not shut the fuck up about Fallout in that original video. Like, even though I claimed I wanted to keep the comparisons to a minimum, I'll be completely honest, I did a terrible job at it. But the reason I did that was because Fallout, and by extension, most Bethesda RPGs, were the most experience I had with first-person RPGs. RPGs in general, really. When it's clear, especially now having finally played through all the games, it's fucking Deus Ex. Cyberpunk has so much of Deus Ex's DNA inside its gameplay and narrative structure that I felt like an insane person for not seeing it earlier, and I'm a bit surprised more people haven't seen that. I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense since we haven't had a game in this series in 8 years, but like, I see people even now still debate on the types of games to compare it to, be it Fallout or Far Cry, but I'm just like, you fucking kidding me? It's just fucking open world Deus Ex. That, and also the opening hours, because while I still believe it's a bit flawed, holy shit, Street Kid just sucks as a life path choice. Like, I know I said Jackie was still forced into the story in the other two life paths, which is true, but I really can't underestimate just how much better he's woven into the story in Corpo and Nomad. You feel like you have more natural chemistry with him instead of just, hey, I almost just killed you, you wanna get food? It feels so rushed in comparison to the other two openings. I'm pretty sure it's the shortest one even now, thinking about it, compared to the other two. What else? The tutorial really isn't as bad as I thought. Yeah, I still think it's kind of shit the stealth-related sections are optional because you really aren't going to get as much out of the game as you should if you ignore the stealth systems, but even then, I think a linear structure like this was the best way they could teach the player all these mechanics. As much as I think everyone would want that, not every game can have an invisible tutorial like that, unfortunately, especially when, again, it has all these mechanics. Hell, even Deus Ex does the same thing with its tutorial. Also, I should have actually used better examples instead of other FPSs, but we don't talk about that. That's about it though, this game fucking rules. It's only gotten better with time, and the 2.0 update mixed with Phantom Liberty has legit turned what was originally a 7 bordering on an 8 into an 8 bordering on a 9 for me. Remember how I said how much of Cyberpunk's gameplay in my original video reminded me of Sims and that freedom of choice you were offered feeling super addicting to experiment with? I wasn't far off, like, at all. And everything I loved about the gameplay elements has only been amplified with 2.0's balance changes and skill tree tweaks. And Phantom Liberty's quest and gigs only amplify that further. They are so good. You have so much freedom with how you accomplish tasks and how to interact with the world to your advantage that it feels stupid just writing this when I could be making a new save file with that build idea that's been sitting in my head right now. I think the only real complaint I have is the weapon limit. Not that it's bad if you're building for 1 or 2 weapon types, but for someone like me who likes to build for quite a few weapon types and play a loud stealth hybrid, I wish we had an inventory bar like Deus Ex or even Prey. Hell, Prey had the spiral weapon wheel sort of thing, which would have been extra appreciated here. Also, for whatever reason, hiding bodies in containers just counts as a kill now? Not that going non-lethal really matters in this game aside from 1 or 2 quests, but I just found that really weird considering how you had the option to do it in the past and have it not count as a kill. That's about it though. Any other complaints I have are so minor and nitpicky to the point that it doesn't matter. If you haven't played Cyberpunk yet, I cannot recommend it enough. Straight up, this is one of the best modern AAA Sims of the past era next to Prey and Dishonored. I only wish it just had proper mapping tools like other games for custom missions or gigs, but I mean, hey, maybe we aren't far off if that recent Witcher 3 news is anything to go by. Give it a few years when we're all removed from the launch day blunders, and this will become a classic. I guarantee it. Can I say this game suffered from the Sim curse except it actually recovered? Yeah, you saw this coming from a mile away. I can't talk Cyberpunk without talking about this game. And in this case as well, have it in this list without having this game here either because I only now played it this year. I'm just gonna cheat again for this ranking and say the whole mainline trilogy, because they're all great. I know that's a cop-out, but fuck you, this series is awesome. And yes, I said trilogy. I haven't touched Invisible War, and from what I'm aware, that is for the better. It's really hard to pick my favorite. The first game, despite aging a bit with its balance, and particularly some useless skills, is still a classic and fun to play all these years later. I really can't emphasize enough just how much of this game next to Prey led me down that Sim rabbit hole. That moment of, oh my god, I was right, this is absolutely everything I loved about Cyberpunk, I need to find more, absolutely impacted me so hard. There were so many nights during my first playthrough over the summer that I just stay up until 3 in the morning, constantly saying, okay, just one more mission. These games are fucking addicting, dude. That, and it still has some of the best unintentional comedic timing I've seen in a game ever. The amount of times me and my friends have quoted stuff from the first game is unmatched.
Ezra Miller's in the movie, right?
Yeah, that's me.
Really?
You are welcome to stroll around the laboratories.
The fucking door.
Your security pass can be canceled with no warning.
I've looked forward to this.
Please clip that. That's so good.
Wait to ask questions.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Human Revolution is pretty good too, again delivering on a great narrative with some fun characters and awesome continued world building. And you know what? You should give Mankind Divided 2 a shot if you haven't. It's got the weakest story in the whole series, no doubt due to Squeenix's shit management and rushing Eidos Montreal's work out the door for the sake of a sequel, but it's also got some awesome improvements from Human Revolution that just make it the better game in terms of gameplay, I feel. This game in particular, I felt a lot of Cyberpunk's DNA on in terms of its mechanics. I mean, quick hacking is literally just remote manipulation on steroids. All these games go on sale for dirt cheap during sales, so there is no reason to not pick them up. If you're at all curious about Sims and want something more complex than BioShock, absolutely give these a shot. You will not regret it. An Embracer group can suck my
Look at you, hacker. A pathetic creature of meat and bone, panting and sweating as you run through my corridors.
How can you challenge a perfect, immortal machine?
Another game I'm very late to the party on, but so happy I finally played it this year. I really don't even know what else to say on this one that others already haven't. Aside from probably the shooting not aging the best and having some pretty overwhelming opening hours, System Shock 2 is awesome, and is another one of those commonly regarded best of all time contenders for good reason. Once you get your build set up and understand everything the game has going on, everything just clicks. There's so much playstyle variation too, depending on your build or what military branch you take, that just makes me want to replay it again and again. The atmosphere is still on point too, even with the dated visuals. The voice acting is genuinely great, and the Von Braun has this consistently creepy nature to it that only goes into overdrive when the many are fully brought into play and you're walking through flesh caverns. It has a learning curve by all means, but if you can get past that, System Shock 2 is a classic that needs to be played if you haven't already. And if the quality keeps up, like with the Quake 2 remaster, by the time you're watching this, you probably won't be far off from playing the best version of this game, with VR support, which, oh god, I'm going to be replaying this until the end of time. Also one of the best endings in a video game that was so good it had to be paralleled by id Software years later.
Nah.
No.
This, right here, is absolute Kino. If Deus Ex and Cyberpunk weren't enough to fully convert me to adoring stealth in games, Thief 2 was the contingency plan to that. Thief 2 is a fucking masterpiece that stands the test of time nearly 25 years later, even despite its simplicity. Now, you're probably wondering, why Thief 2 and not Thief 1? You're probably gonna hate me for this, but I don't actually like 1 a whole lot. Not to say it's a bad game, it laid out the core gameplay that 2 would iterate on and just improve even more with more gear and improved AI. But Thief 1 has what I genuinely believe to have some of the most schizophrenic level quality I've seen in a game. Let me explain, right? So, after that tutorial, you got Bafford's Mansion, a great starting mission that puts everything you learned in your training to the test, while also not overwhelming the player with larger locations just yet. Then, you got Craigscleft, which is okay. I could have gone without those haunted mines in the beginning in that map that makes no sense, but it's decent. Then, there's the Bone Horde, which is fine. Wish I knew not to use all my fucking fire arrows the first time I played, making that puzzle for the Mystic Soul impossible, but whatever. But then, you've got Assassins, a fucking incredible mission with some of the best progression and pulling the rug over the player I've seen in a game. You start off thinking, okay, robbing a hammer temple sounds good to me, when suddenly, the shopkeeper you're buying from in the previous cutscene gets longshot meddled by mistake. Something clearly isn't right, so let's ignore that and follow the killers and see where this goes. Keep close and take in the city as you follow them. And it probably goes without saying, but it's absolutely insane how this is more or less a trailing mission, but actually fun. But then, you make it to their mansion, only to find out this was the work of some local crime lords who wanted you dead for doing a better job at thieving than them. And Garrett, this absolute Chad, decides, yeah, I'm not gonna kill you even though you tried to kill me. I'm just gonna steal all your shit to prove that I'm the better thief. Fucking legend. And the mission then opens up to your standard mansion heist. So good. Next mission has to be even better, right? So then, you have Thieves Guild. I spent 3 fucking hours wandering around this mission before giving up and deciding to use the skip level command in pure frustration because this level is a mess and notorious in the community for good reason. Then, there's the sword, which while visually cool is a confusing mess with a map that makes no sense, and do you see where I'm getting at here? There's just so many levels that either range from meh to confusing labyrinths of hell that it really killed my motivation to actually beat this game the first time around. And look, I don't want to make it out like Thief 1 doesn't have lesser missions either than Thief 2. I already mentioned Assassins, but Mage Tower, Song of the Caverns, and Undercover are all great missions that stack up next to T2's best. And I don't want it to come off either like I think supernatural focus missions are objectively bad either. Deadly Shadows did them pretty well, and to get ahead of myself a bit here, there's tons of fan missions that do a great job too. A few weeks back as of writing, I finally beat the Black Parade, a massive fan campaign for Thief 1 that took nearly a decade to make, made by some of the community's best mappers. And its tomb raiding and supernatural missions are genuinely really good. But the thing is, unlike Thief 1's base missions with these scenarios, there's a good sense of conveyance throughout all of them. It's pretty clear what path you need to take and where to go, and even if you do get lost, the rooms are so distinct and recognizable as to where you are, it'll only take like 10 seconds to look at your compass and cross-reference it with your map. Look, I don't think Thief 1 is a bad game, but I'm just saying that if you're a fan and you're ending your playthrough series like this...
God, this sucks. I'm so glad Thief 2 happened, or else this series' reputation would have never recovered.
Then I think it's safe to say it probably doesn't hold up that well. Thief 2 has none of these problems. Yes, the lack of mission variety is why some do consider Thief 2 a lesser game than the first, and I totally understand that. But really, I don't care because Thief 2's missions are just fun the whole way through. There's only like 2 bad levels out of 15, and one of them isn't even because the design of the level is bad. Far from it, it's great. It's only because of the stipulations you have to complete it under so that you revisit again right after that it just makes it feel like obvious padding. But that's really the most of T2's issues I had. This game is just fucking incredible. Yes, you can argue the story is also a bit lesser compared to the first, but fuck, I didn't care. The character writing and overall plot in general is still stellar and holds up tremendously well. In general, the first 2 games' visual identity is still top tier. The cutscenes do a lot with a little, and in turn, have what I feel is some of the most timeless presentation possible. This mix of live-action silhouettes and sort of animated paintings are genuinely beautiful. And in-game, despite the obviously limited visuals by today's standards, makes up for it with beautiful environments and locales and some amazing ambient soundscapes. Legit, this game is the perfect nighttime game for me if I want something to play but also want to mellow myself out before bed, because it has that mood to relax, but also gameplay that still feels engaging yet mellow at the same time. Thief's stealth gameplay might appear simple by today's standards, and in some ways it is, but that simplicity still makes it incredibly satisfying to play 25 years later. And that's topped with amazing sound design that's integrated with gameplay and the surfaces you walk on, which can alert NPCs based on how loud they are. Learning the best ways to use your tools and eliminate guards from the playing field never gets old, and the level design just incentivizes that even more with so much exploration. This game is just a near masterpiece, and I'm so happy I finally played it this year. And fuck, I only mentioned it a bit before, but the amount of fan missions out in the wild just makes it clear that I'll be playing this until I'm dead. It's almost classic Doom levels of quantity in just how much there is. If you've only now finished these games and want to look into more FMs for yourself, I mean, the Black Parade and T2X will be the first things I'll recommend, but I also cannot recommend Marble Man's beginner FM recommendations and his FM retrospective enough. This dude has a lot of great Thief content on his channel that just deserves so much more attention. Please give him some love. And again, if you want more official Thief, I'd totally give Deadly Shadows a shot as well, especially with the sneaky upgrade mod that removes those pesky load zones during missions. Have I said enough yet that I love these games and I think you should play them? Am I selling it enough yet? But, among everything else, there was one game that actually came out this year that stole my heart. And because it actually did come out this year, it wasn't even close. Just what can I say about this game that others or even I haven't said already in that old video? Hi-Fi Rush is a masterpiece. It's easily one of the best games I've played this current generation, and I will never get over how not only it came in out of absolutely nowhere with no build-up or hype whatsoever and managed to be incredible, but also be a commercial and critical success despite that lack of build-up. Maybe not enough for Microsoft's stupidly high expectations, but let's not worry about that right now. I'll also find it funny just how so many people were in denial over its actual quality or just making up shit that wasn't true just to fuel their petty ass console wars. And now the exact same people who shot on the game day one suddenly don't have an issue now that's on their console of choice. But they can enjoy it now too, so I don't care. Everything about this game is just incredible and filled with so much joy. From the music selection, the characters, the writing, the beautiful animation, the addictive gameplay that always puts up a challenge, nothing ever lets up. It is on full blast the whole way through, and I couldn't stop smiling throughout the whole thing. A part of me honestly wishes, looking back, I made separate videos for both Evil West and this game, because trying to mash them both into one whole piece about what people consider to be outdated in gaming wasn't enough to really articulate just how much I love this game and why I feel it's a masterpiece. And it's only gotten better since I've made that first video too, with the addition of the BPM rush and power up tower up modes to hone your skills further. Hell, I didn't even mention all the other post-game content I've still gotta get through, like the rest of the mural challenges and the hidden Spectra doors and levels. It's made me pick up other character action games and finally trying to get into that, and man, what a great time it's been. Hi-Fi Rush might not have won all the major awards it was nominated for, but the respect it has and will continue to get from the gaming public makes up for it. It is still being talked about all this time later, and I feel it'll remain that way for years to come. For what's probably the last game with industry legend Shinji Mikami's name on it, I couldn't think of a better way to go out. Play it now before it either gets delisted or the licensed music gets patched out because Microsoft execs can suck my dick. Okay, so update time. I'm basically not reading from a script from this. I'm kind of just going to be sort of yapping, CEO of yapping for the next few minutes. Just talk about where the hell I've been past few months, why things have been so slow, and my god, it's really been 9 months since my last video. I cannot apologize enough for that, genuinely. But okay, where the hell have I been? Short answer is college and mental issues. Long answer is, so pretty much for like the longest time, I've had a lot of trouble kind of balancing together doing college and consistently getting videos out. I know I've never really had a sort of schedule, but I've always wanted to do, one video a month. That was always kind of my aim, but it's always been especially hard, especially with college work, because I have this like mindset where any kind of video work is like inferior in terms of priority compared to, my actual schoolwork, which is, more important. So in turn, I'll like always hyper focus on school work, and I can't like work on a video. I can like write a script like here and there, but in terms of like actually recording and like getting footage and all that, it'll always feel like, what am I doing? This is just a waste of time in comparison to everything else. This is also why there was kind of like a big break between, I don't remember what that last video was, but it was the video that came before the first Cyberpunk video I did. That's why there was like such a long wait in there. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I was gonna do a Cyberpunk 2.0 Phantom Liberty video. In fact, I pretty much prepared myself very much in advance for it. I recorded my entire new save file that I made to go through the base game and the DLC just so, I could get all my bases down. And my plan was, once I was done with my finals for this semester, over the holiday break, I would just work pretty much non-stop on that just so I could get something out. But that didn't entirely happen just because of something else that, in all honesty, I didn't really expect. I've never really sort of opened up about this for the longest time, but ever since I was a kid, I always wanted to be an artist. An animator, to be more specific, but, long story slightly shorter, it didn't work out the best in high school. I kind of didn't do well at it, and I was convinced, for the longest time, that wasn't for me. That was not where my career path was going to go down, so I kind of abandoned that. That's where I sort of started going into editing for a little bit, and now I sort of transferred over. I've been doing game design now, but something happened over the last semester was I ended up taking an art course because that's one of the requirements. You gotta take like a basic game art course, and surprisingly enough, it was very fun, like more fun than I've probably had with anything in forever, really. I did really good in there. Professor was just the nicest person ever. It was like night and day compared to that first experience I had in high school. So when I got home from break, I kind of just said, fuck it, let's draw again. And that was kind of what I did for a lot of it, actually. I got a tablet over the break, I got a sketchbook, and I've been drawing, I drew pretty much almost every day over the current break, and it was probably the most creatively invigorated I've felt in a long time. And it's still very fun, relaxing to do, genuinely. If you feel like you've failed at art, literally, take what I'm saying, just try it again, nothing is truly over. You just gotta, you know, put in the time and the effort and the enthusiasm and passion, really. But yeah, like I said, I was planning to get all of that Cyberpunk stuff done over the break, but that ended up not happening because pretty much I just wanted to draw. Like, I just wanted to keep drawing every day. There were so many days I would just, like, you know, sit in front of my script. And again, it's not like I had, like, you know, I had nothing to say about the expansion. I had a lot, actually. I had, like, a whole, maybe, like, 10 or so pages written down. But I just, like, would draw a blank there because every time I would sit down, just be like, fuck, I want to draw right now. And inevitably, that would be what I would do for the next day. And then, you know, my second, like, half of the school year would start, and, you know, all the workflow would come in on top of, you know, other stress from being alone on campus, having trouble socializing. It was really hard for me to get anything done, really. And I just ended up losing interest over time. Again, I may revisit it at some point or another. Again, I had a lot to say about it. That section I did, there's a lot of stuff there I didn't even get to talk about, but pretty much just like that whole workload of the second semester combined with, you know, everything else, you know, wanting to draw more, and even then, you know, schoolwork getting in the way of that, it was just a lot. And again, I do apologize because I know there are people who do follow this channel, like legitimately do follow and, like, you know, anticipate the next upload, and I really cannot. I did not do any of this. I've made this clear 1,000 times. I did not start this channel with the intent of getting big, and the fact I have well over 6,000 people actually waiting for my stuff is awe-inspiring. I cannot thank you all enough. And even, like, you know, I'll see comments, you know, I may not heart everything, but I see every comment, you know. Even, like, on other videos, like, I made a reply on Civi's, like, 3D Realms vibe check video, and seeing everyone be like, dude, where the hell have you been? I want to see your next video. I'm so glad you're not dead. Like, that's why I'm here, you know, and it really makes me happy just seeing that. Even just, like, you know, from 1 or 2 people, it means the world to me. So here's where we're at, and again, I know it's weird because I've never really set schedule for my channel, but at this point, I feel like uploads are probably gonna be just more whenever I feel like it. I think it'll very much pick up again over the summer. I got a couple ideas in my head to work on, but I also want to split up between, you know, obviously not only, you know, improving in art, but also improving my game design chops. I'm actually starting to slowly look into making maybe some maps for Quake and Quake 2 especially, because that has trench broom support, like, out of the box for the remaster. I'm not going to abandon this channel or anything. Again, that is the last thing I want to do, because again, I still enjoy making videos, but there's just been so much in terms of, like, life stuff and, you know, other stuff I wanted to do. It's just been hard, unfortunately. And making a video like this really does take a long time. Like, I think this took, like, maybe 3 weeks in total. And also, what didn't help as well is, you know, I got back from school, I came home, ready to work on everything, and then, you know, just for 2 weeks, I had the worst sinus infection known to man. I could not do anything. My body was, like, aching. I couldn't hear shit. It was not fun, but, you know, that's all aside. Glass bones, paper skin, all that shit. Who cares? Either way, I guess just expect uploads maybe to come out a bit less. Again, I know it feels weird saying this. I never had a set schedule, but I just do want to keep people's expectations in check. And the last thing I really do want to do is disappoint everyone. Because again, like, you know, I make these videos, you know, not only for myself, but to an extent, it's for you guys as well, because you're the ones actually watching this shit, you know? But yeah, that's about all I wanted to say. I just wanted to keep everyone in the loop on what's going on, where I've been, and all that. If you've made it this far and are still listening, again, I want to thank you all so much for your support and everything throughout the whole years, you know, commenting, sharing, whatever. It means the world to me. I know I sound like a broken record, but I mean all of this from the bottom of my heart. I could not ask for a better community from you guys. And I do hope, really, that this was worth the wait. This video was a meat, but, like, I just had so much to talk about. I had so many, like, good games I played last year that I just wanted to talk about. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you again for watching. Hopefully I'll have something else out soon. Thanks again for watching, everybody. Have a great night. Take care.